Hi everybody, in this video we're going to go over the poetry unit. So for the poetry project, students are going to write a 15-line poem that illustrates your past, where I'm from, where your present, where I am, and or your future, where I will be. That includes descriptive and figurative language. By intentional word choice, the poem should bring images and emotions to the reader's mind. And then if you have a poetry enthusiast who blows through this in 15 minutes, they could make an online or tangible portfolio that has their top five favorite poems in it, as well as descriptions about why they love each one and to give it aesthetic appeal. So there's room for everyone in this project, for the kid who hates poetry and the kid who loves poetry. So they at least have to write a poem about themselves, and they can use a template if they want, or they can do it however they want, because that is poetry. Poetry has no restrictions. So there's guidelines, but if they want more than 15 lines, fewer than 15 lines, they are allowed to do that as long as they stay within this mastery context. So to get mastery, the poem has to describe the poet's background and identity using descriptive and figurative language. It evokes strong imagery and emotions. Word choices are precise and enhance the meaning of the poem, and there are no typos or spelling errors. So that's how they get mastery. So as long as they can do all of those things, they can write their poem however they want. There is a template called Where I'm From, and they can use that too. So sky's the limit with this. So for day 31, the very first day of the poetry unit, I'm going to insert a poem here, and then I want to insert some image that has to do with that here, and I'm just going to have them respond to it in their composition notebooks. We'll do good news and 3 vocabulary words. And then our daily objective is to explain what we're working toward and to create a definition of poetry. So it's the Mastery Day overview, and they're going to need worksheet, or they're going to need worksheet A and worksheet B. So we have the Mastery Day instructions, the rubric, as well as the objective and the essential questions and their reflections. So I'm going to tell them all about Mastery Day and how it's going to work. And we're going to go over the rubric, about what it looks like to show mastery. And I'll talk about the performance task. We'll do the objective, and I'll introduce the essential questions. And I'll give them time to answer any questions that they have. Or I will give them time to ask any questions that they have. So I want them to turn and talk after we've done all of that. And then I want them to turn and talk about what we're doing and why we're doing it. And then I want them to write here on worksheet B, what are we doing and why are we doing it? And then here's where they have time to ask questions. And I want them to choose a norm and write down what it looks like in action here on worksheet B. And yeah, there's that part. And then I want them to put the Mastery Day instructions and this guide in section 1 of their binder. And then we're going to talk about what poetry is. So using this worksheet here, we're going to create a definition of poetry, because I feel like if students don't understand what poetry is, it's a lot harder to analyze, it's a lot harder to create, and it's a lot harder to love. So if you can get a definition, then I think that is a really good starting point. So we're going to do this again with a document-based inquiry. And I have it as this, but you don't have to have it. The first phase is quotes, the second is videos, the third is poetry itself, and then we'll move on to a scattered synthesis. So for those of you who have never done a DBI, put your kids in groups of 3 or 4 and put realia, documents, whatever, in manila envelopes, 1 manila envelope for each group, and hand it out to them and have them talk to each other about this question. The essential question for this is, what is poetry? And then, so each group gets a manila envelope filled with quotes for phase 1. You hand it out to them. They pull all the quotes out that have something to do with poetry. They talk about the quotes together, and they write down their notices here and their wonders here. So in terms of the question, what is poetry? What are the quotes helping them notice? What are the quotes helping them wonder? And then after phase 1, after the timer goes off, I'm going to have the students put the quotes back in the manila envelope. I'm going to collect them, And then I'm going to show them a video, and they will write notices and wonders. And then phase 3 is poetry. So I will give them another envelope, one for each group, that is full of poetry examples. And from those examples, they will write down anything that helps them notice what poetry is, anything that has them wonder what poetry is, they'll write down here. Then phase 4 is a scattered synthesis, where we just do brain barf and we synthesize what's all of the information that we've been talking about here on in this section of the worksheet. Where are they in their thinking with poetry? What is poetry? And then phase 5 is an organized synthesis. So that is page 2 of this. Phase 5, poetry is da 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 da. And they write that on a sticky note. So the teacher needs to stick a sticky note right here, and they write their answer to the question, what is poetry? They write it on this sticky note here, and then they do a sticky note synthesis where they have, so they use this document here, and they meet with their group, or you can switch up the groups if you would like. And they each put a sticky note here on each corner. They read each other's definitions of poetry. They take awesome elements from each definition and create a new, powerful, and concise one right here in the middle. And the sentence starter could be, poetry is da 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 da. And then now we go over the group answers, and I can type them here so we can record all of these fabulous answers, or maybe you could have them add it to a chart or on the board or whatever you would like to do. And then I'm going to have them reflect on how they are getting closer to Mastery Day. And then we'll move on to day 32. Okay, we're gonna have another poem here where they respond to it. We'll do good news and 3 vocabulary words. And the objective for the day is to identify types of figurative language in poetry. I'm not gonna have them memorize types of figurative language. I'm not gonna test them on figurative language. I'm just going to give them information about figurative language where they can keep it handy in their notes and refer to it as they analyze poetry. So here I'm going to do a figurative language overview with worksheet H, A, B, C, D, F, G, H, where I have actually given them the definitions and they can add to their notes here, because I don't think there's any reason in memorizing definitions in 2025. So I've given them to them, I've given them an example, and then they can add notes and examples here on the right-hand side. So then in groups, I'm going to give them another envelope that has sentences with figurative language in them. And using this handout as a guide, this handout H as a guide, I'm going to have them sort their sentences into the types of figurative language. And we all know that poetry is super subjective, so they might have a little bit of an argument as to whether something is symbolism or a metaphor, and that's great. So we want them to talk to each other and sort them into piles and talk to each other about why they think it should go in which pile. And then we're going to read some actual poetry so I'll take back the sentences, and maybe we could have a quick discussion about why they sorted them the way that they did, or whatever you want to do with that. But just the conversation is really the most important part, so they can see that all of these types of figurative language have quite a bit of nuance in them. And then we're going to do the poetry walk, where they're going to take handout H with them to take notes on the thoughts that they have about each poem and what they like and dislike and what types of figurative language that they notice. So you can post poems on the wall, you can put them on the desks, you can do stations, however you want to do it, but they're walking around the room reading different types of poetry. And I can use this slide to give them an example of what they could write on their handout. And then after they do the poetry walk, we're going to do a quick, very chill Socratic seminar about what types of figurative language they're noticing, what types of themes, what cultural beliefs and values they're noticing, and what they like and dislike about the poems. I would strongly encourage you to pick poems that students will actually like. Pick some song lyrics from artists that they like. Google poems for teenagers, but give them ones that they will like and enjoy. Otherwise, you're not going to get them to like poetry. Okay, and then after the Socratic seminar, have them reflect and tell them to have a really good day. And then we'll move on to day 33. I'm going to have them respond to another poem here, just so they can get exposed to lots of different types of poetry. You could do a really old one just to get funny reactions. We'll do good news and 3 vocabulary words, and then the objective is to begin writing their own narrative poem. So before they start writing, I want to show examples of narrative poetry. So rather than just general poetry like we read yesterday, I want them to read specific narrative poetry. And as they read, I want them to pay attention to what they're learning about people, what they notice about figurative language, and what they like and dislike. And after they have a chance to read a couple of examples, I'm going to tell them, you're going to write your own version of those, and let's brain barf to get thinking about where you're from. So I'm just going to give them a whole bunch of questions to get them thinking about where they're from. Feel free to change anything. And they can either talk about these in groups and write notes, or they can just write notes quietly, however you want to do it. But like, here's a bunch of questions to get them thinking. So like, when you think of your childhood, what objects come to mind? When you think of your hometown, what colors, sights, and smells do you experience? And there are 11 of those. So I'm just going to go through 11 of those. And then after they've either had a chance to write or talk and write, I want them to circle or highlight things that they may want to write about in their poem. And then I'm just going to have them start writing. So like I said, there are templates for where I'm from poems if you have a student who has no idea where to start. So go ahead and use one of those. Otherwise, just tell the kids to start writing. And some kid is going to finish today, which is why I've given them the extension project where they can compile their favorite poems in like a journal or a Google Doc or something. But you are going to have kids who are going to take the whole time. So just make sure that you have an enrichment project for the kids who are going to finish this really quickly. So after they've had a chance to write, I'm going to tell them to reflect and have a good day. And then on day 34, it's pretty much a repeat. They'll warm up to a poem. We'll do good news and 3 vocabulary words. And then the objective is to make progress. And then I'm going to have them write, and I'm going to put a timer on the board here for how much time they have left until we need to reflect. Then they're going to reflect, and I'm going to tell them to have a really good day. On day 35, warm up is the same. Do good news and vocabulary. And the objective today is to finish the narrative poem and to share it with the teacher. Most days before Mastery Day, I have them do friend feedback, but since poetry is subjective and since it's about where they're from, I'm not going to have kids do any feedback. We're only going to do positive affirmations on Mastery Day. So I'm going to tell them to write, put a timer on the board, and then reflect, and then the next day is Mastery Day. So if you want to, you can have them do the warm-up. Otherwise, if you want to use every single second of the time for Mastery Day, have them just skip that. Do good news, and then our objective is to give positive affirmations on our friends' poetry. And here are some comments they could make. And I made a teeny little handout of this exact same thing if they forget what they could write. Okay, so let me back up. So on the Cult of Pedagogy podcast, the guy that taught this said to try to do this in a different room just to make it different and special, because it's a really neat experience. And if you go somewhere else, it just adds to that special feeling. So if you can go to another room, I typed out these little handouts that they could take with them and put them in their pocket for ideas to help them think of something to write on their friends' poems. So the poems will be posted. So sorry, on day 35, the day before Mastery Day, you need to tell the kids to make sure that they share it with you. So that is one of the objectives, that they share it with the teacher. So on day 36, the teacher has had them printed and posted all over the library or the gym or somewhere special. Even if it's the classroom, it's going to be fabulous. So you could you could leave the names on them, or you could leave them anonymous, whatever you want to do. But the kids will walk around and they will leave positive affirmations, as many poems as they have time to do. We're not giving advice on how it could be better. We're not correcting anything. We're just giving positive affirmations. And then after that, then the student can get their poem back and see all of these positive affirmations about their fabulous poem that they wrote. So that's what we're going to do on Mastery Day. And go look up that. I'm going to link below the Cult of Pedagogy website so you can see it in more detail. Okay, so they can do the warm-up if you have time for it, and good news. And then the objective is to give positive affirmations on Friends poetry. These are comments they could make, some sort of affirmation, mention how you connect with the poem, or point out a value or cultural belief within the poem that resonates with you. And then worksheet F is a tiny little handout that they could take with them. And the rules are that it has to be totally silent. We're not giving any corrections or advice, and I don't want them to spend any time looking for their own poem. I just want them to read and enjoy their friends' poems. And then here's where we do the poetry walk. And then we come back to the classroom or just back to original seats, and we do the Socratic seminar where we revisit the essential questions that we have been uncovering throughout the unit. What is poetry? How does it help me express myself? What was the writing process like for you? What were your thoughts as you read your classmates' poetry, and how has your thinking changed or expanded? And then they'll do the final reflection, which is worksheet J. Sorry, this should say C. They'll do the final reflection, which is worksheet C, and you can include this in your grade, or you could just grade the actual poem itself. So as I'm doing the poetry walk, I can grade live, or I can just enjoy the experience and give affirmations and grade later. However you want to do it is fabulous. And then after we do our final reflection, add an icon. We'll add an icon to the timeline and celebrate that we have finished another unit. Thanks, everybody. I hope this poetry unit is super meaningful and fun for you. Share student examples with me and have a really good time. Thanks, everybody. Go smash it.